She put a pot on she hair and gone. Them a the first one out on the dam. Basket on she head, bucket in each hand. Hold up on she frock, I wanna she grandson. To the market, them a go. For the morning, the day is dawning. For cock-a-crow to give the villagers a warning. Rise and shine, the birds them a sing. All animal take turn as them join in the waking. Cock-a-crow, dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck-a-qua. Cock-a-crow, dagaba, donkey, bray, horse, and they even duck-a-qua. Come and hear this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. All day a back down, me now a come home. The naga jackass yard for fetch the load. Cockle shy hand, bag over shoulder, running by his side, a Rexy and Rover. From the farm, them a come. Sun a go down but up the river. Some washing clothes, some folks are bathing at the water. Fisherman, they catch them a bring. From a canoe boat, man, them start offloading. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Lokonani. Aymara, Kwakwari, Hail Baka Kuma Kuma, even Bangameri. Listen to this sweet story that tell the people about life in the country. Them children glad when the weekend come. Out in the yard, them all gather round. Some a play catcher, some making house from straw. Two who come later, a grandma or grandpa. All a sit down just a wait. Moonlight so bright, it's just the right time to listen story or to say a little nursery rhyme. Grandpa voice a echo in the night as he tell some picnic are there with fright. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma, Bura, Nancy, even Watamuma. Oh, Ligan, Mungeza, Massa Kurma, Bura, Nancy, even Watamuma. Yeah, man, that's the true story that tell the people about life in the country. In the country, life in the country.
Hi, blessed good evening, everyone. Pleasant to be in your homes this evening. My name is Sharma Solomon. I am your host for this program, Straight Up. I know we promised a program that we will work on, but Guyana is such a fluid society, and its complexities of issues that continues to emerge one after the other is what would have, at least for now, cause for this program to at least continue the way it is until we can have it structured and designed, maybe very accommodative to you, the viewers. Make it, as I continue to say, very interactive and really make it your program. However, like we would do from time to time, unscripted as we would conduct this program, as I try to follow Mark Benchcop, the host, and let me again, as I do on Thursdays, apologize for his absence. We know Mark is pursuing higher education, and we wish him well. And besides that, he's a family man with some commitments. So it's always good to give him some support whenever he does pick the phone up and give a call for for someone to give him support on this program. So I hope, like I usually would, be able to do every week, allow this program to be very interactive on issues. From the first Thursday that I came on, I outlined that this very unscripted program is really following one common theme of bringing the context of our society into conversation and discussion. And that one common theme is a democratic society, democracy. What is this thing that we call democracy? So, quietly, what we've been doing is breaking down democracy and the different elements of what is a democratic society to begin with. And we started out with discussing the issue of good governance and what are the elements of good governance and where we saw the absence of good governance. And we even said that on those elements of what constitutes democracy, and I hope that we're not sounding like a very textbook show, but the importance of any struggle, any engagement, the importance of any, and I'll be very frank with the audience that chimes in from time to time, any boots on the ground is knowledge. You have to educate yourselves. You have to understand what this thing is. You have to be able to aggregate the interests of the concerns, and then you have to be able to articulate them clearly. I speak from experience, and that is what I do every time I come to this show, and to speak on those different elements of democracy, whether it is good governance, because the experience of being the chairman of Region 10 brought for me an understanding of when we see the absence of good governance. We spoke after that on the issue of human rights. The experience as chairman of Region 10, based on the right to life, and having that first-hand experience of seeing that right violated, and the sort of rights in this community in terms of Article 13, not being respected of citizens' right to be involved in decision-making process. Those rights and human rights that were very evident in the United States State Department report on human rights is something that I have the experience, I have an understanding of being in leadership and how to deal with those issues, as we have had to we dealt with them in the past and continue to deal with them even now. We dealt with the issue of press freedom. Again, our experience in Region 10 is what we bring to you in these conversations of having a community, the only community in this country with one television station and a one television station policy that continues to be promoted by a government who glowingly last week held a forum for Press Freedom Day, a 3-day shindig of all sorts of fancities and what they'll do, while in Region 10, they continue to uphold that which is a constitutional breach of people's right to have access to information unimpeded and uninterrupted. So I bring to you those considerations in what we deal with. And in the area of promoting democracy, because we talk about democracy not being only free and fair elections, but democracy, a true democratic society, consists of these elements that I outlined earlier. But it also consists of a few. And we'll speak on free and fair elections because it was my intent this evening to have a conversation on what we see coming out of GCO and what it means as we move forward for free and fair elections. However, another critical element to democracy and to ensure, and so far, all the elements I spoke on. So we're aggregating our interests. We're seeing that though some people might be sleeping today, tomorrow problems might become knocking at your door. Whether that is you're not having access to information, whether it is your right to life and violation of human rights are occurring, as we see they are with Mr. Boston, Mr. Sampat, and others, who unfortunately lost their lives at the hands of elements of the state. We've experienced that in Region 10. or even the issue of the government not practicing good governance and what that means for your community. So one of the issues that we'll discuss this evening, having not had the opportunity to get in details to GCOM, and I think it is very important. So this evening we'll have a guest on, somebody that I'm very familiar with, and I know you two are, uh, Apostle Nigel London, as we tackle another element of what constitutes a democratic society, and that will be the role of civil society. I know Pastor Landon, Apostle Landon, in fact, is with a group, the People's Movement. And I know over the year or so, the group was very active. Before we got to a group, it was an individual in Apostle Nigel Landon. And I know we'll cover the issue of civil society, aggregating that particular issue, and then how do we articulate to see how effective civil society can be in terms of the challenges that we face in this society, in this country we call Guyana, and the sort of patience, like how we see people are impressing on the political parties. We see people impressing on the trade unions. They had Labor Day last week. We want to know if people are impressing on civil society in terms of this boots on the ground concept also, and saying, listen, y'all two doing as much talking as these others within the society of representation, right? And we're not seeing boots on the ground. So, Apostle, I know you're no stranger. You and I, we've had our many conversations. We're also part of this community that continues to suffer. And we'll get into the sufferings and also to articulate those sufferings and how do we get people to understand. But on the matter that is a principal element of the function of a democratic society. Last week, the 6th, we saw the Guyana Policy Forum, a civil society group, complaining that government really doesn't even recognize them. And the president, by his own admission, said he doesn't recognize them. In such an absent-mindedness of the importance and the role of civil society by the executive, how do you see your role? And where do you see, if challenges exist, how to deal with those challenges, including not being recognized by the executive?
Well, thank you so much. And I must say good evening to you, Mr. Solomon, and to all of the viewers and listeners on 107.1. By extension to Mr. Ben Shop as well. Thank you for having me here and to share in such what I consider to be meaningful and very, very important discussions. I think more than anything else are the need to educate, and I'm happy when I heard you say that. The need to educate people now is more important than the need for us to force them to act. Because I realize that persons who act without education or without being duly informed, their actions are generally short-lived or easily thwarted. This is a time for us to have people act with information that is, to some extent, irrefutable. So they will not be easily shaken by words in the wind. In reference to your question about civil society, and of course I happen to be a part of it, I find it quite interesting that it seems as if the PPP Civic Administration has extended their concept of their power to the extent that they believe that they have to recognize a society for it to be functional and for it to have value in a democracy. That is, nothing can be further from the truth. Because for as long as we have got common interests, as long as we've got collective activities, we are a part of, or we constitute civil society. So whether the administration accepts, doesn't accept, recognizes, doesn't recognize, it doesn't change who we are, it doesn't change what we do. What it would more than anything else cause is for them to be injured in their effort to continue to seek to disregard critical elements in a democracy. And I'm so glad that we're speaking at that term as well, because many Guyanese need to be informed as to exactly what a democracy really is. And hopefully when they understand what a democracy is, they'll see that no government, as they call, because they're not in the government, they're part of the government. No administration can seek to disqualify the effectiveness of civil society by just seeking to say, well, okay, then we don't recognize you, so you're ineffective. That doesn't work like that.
But I like you say injurious, injurious, which means there's a self-inflicting position by the government in their absence or the absence to recognize civil society. And this is being provocative too. What sort of injuries do you believe can occur to an absent-minded state or executive in not recognizing civil society?
Well, for one, uh, civil society doesn't necessarily have or would not necessarily have a political footing in reference to maybe the House of Assembly or some constitutional office. And so they are free to move within the parameters of the state. We can move about, we can interact with so many people. And as is the case with the people's movement, there are elements and the persons from within the PPP Civic who are uh, supportive of the concept of the people's movement, which is that people, Guyanese, will get together and seek to have elected officials function in the manner that they should. So whenever there is disregard for civil society, you find there's greater opportunity for us to influence people. Because, for example, if the president says this, we don't recognize these people, Article 13 and these wannabes and whatever else they want to call them, they are neglecting the powerful fact that the people who they do not want to recognize still have the ear of many of their supporters. So the people who from the PPP Civic, for example, are approaching me with their concerns. The persons from APNUFC approach me with concerns. The persons from many different groups are approaching me with concerns. And if they realize that we happen to be now a target for the disrespect and dishonor of the administration, then it would likely injure the administration in the polls, in their support base, and more than anything else, in the general perception of who they are. Because if civil society manages to convince their support base that you're dealing with tyrants and dictators who don't want to accept a different view, then it's likely that they're going to lose some of that which they consider to be unwavering support.
So two things I got out of that. I really like the two things I got out of that because the first being um, the fact that do you believe the concept of civil disobedience takes on more than just your intention to change the government is going to go to the polls, of course. And I heard you said that. But as someone who experienced that until and unless you get to that point, people's suffering as we experience it now continues. Your action then becomes, do you believe civil disobedience must be disruptive or it can go on and still get the attention of the government by just being civil disobedient?
It can, because the way the world is turning now, especially our world, I should say, there's greater power in what we're doing, for example, and in how people are using social media to dismantle many forms of dictatorships and tyrannical leadership. Civil disobedience doesn't have to be us putting our lives at risk and people going to the street to be injured and all the rest of it, and confronting who I call, to some degree, puppets in the hands of politicians. It doesn't have to be that way. There are so many techniques and mechanisms involved today that can severely injure any group of individuals who believe that they are untouchable and they are capable of controlling the activity of any society. Civil society is now moving whereby there's so many groups, and I can say this without caution. There's so many groups in civil society who are now interacting with us, with me and the People's Movement and so on. And there is a whirlwind that's brewing because we recognize that there's power in civil disobedience taking on a different form.
Well, when we see people houses getting pushed down past, we see mothers being left in the rain. You and I were there. We see people who work their entire lives to even get a space in this 83,000 square miles so that they can call home. And they're treated like that by the state. Even with any sort of redress that the state is now seeking to give, at that moment, at that time, And even that being just one of many issues that are affecting people, we can call a litany of so many things. Um, do you see at this moment, I know you said earlier education is at the forefront, but do you see it being something of a simultaneous approach to taking action, as we now see the People's National Congress, in fact, the coalition, and this is in reference to former Minister Jordan appearing at Soku, is now putting people on the streets. Do you believe now is the time, from your end, to start to bring education also along with advocating for people to go on the streets?
Well, I will always advocate for people to be on the street, but I say again, people to be on the street when they're informed. For example, you've got persons in the case of houses being bulldozed. I sought, and I'm still seeking to inform people about the fact that this situation with the houses have been bulldozed and structures being dismantled in the name of development. We can't just head to the street without, first of all, establishing certain key principles. One is there a right on the part of the government, the administration, and others to say that they have a right to knock your house down in the rain or in the sun or whenever it is? Is it within their right to do so? Is there any legal authority that supports that action? Additionally, most importantly, I would like every Guyanese to understand with as much passion as I can. I mean, I don't feel too well, but I'm still trying my best to get them to understand I'm saying here. This term squatter, when it applies to Guyanese, upsets me. In the context that, why are we allowing ourselves to be labeled as squatters on state land? The state is the people. If we are people in a country, we own the country, we own the oil. Guyanese own everything in this nation. Therefore, how can I be labeled a squatter on my own domain? I can be unregularized. I can be one who's occupying a land without proper regularization. But don't tag our people with certain labels, especially people who are impoverished or seeking a better way of life. Secondly, my brother, is the fact that the Africans, most of whom are affected in this situation, should never be made to pay for a house in this country. We should be given land to farm, given land to develop ourselves based on our history. We are the only group, apart from the Caucasians, who would have been dragged here as slaves, labeled, left as kings and princes and farmers and businessmen and women, and left Africa in that state and came here to be labeled as slaves and property of people. And now you tell me that given our history and given the time when the United Nations would have said that this is the decade for those of African ancestry, I have to beg you for a house lot as if you're granting me a favor. So that's the kind of education I'm speaking to here, where if we cannot get our people to think in that manner, then their actions will be short-lived. Every African must realize that it is within your right to own, not to be given something here. And I hope that people can understand the passion with which I speak. Because if we go to the street just to say they bulldoze our houses, we want to have a house lot, you miss the whole point. It's not about having a house lot, it's about having respect given to African descendants according to the United Nations Declaration and the United Nations commitment that this is our decade ending in 2025. Apart from that, if the people are to take to the street now at this time, and they did not see and are not seeing on a consistent basis continuous powerful representation from the leaders of this of the party and the community, then what are we going to do?
Well, that's the next thing I want to ask, Pastor. Are you satisfied that the sort of aggregating of matters, and I don't take people for granted, as someone who, and I can say over the past 10 years of seeing the way technology would have developed, that provided us with forums such as these, Zoom, and so many quick interaction.
Exactly.
I don't take people for granted that they're ignorant of many of the things that, whether you're in leadership of politics or even civil society, that people are so ignorant that they're not paying attention and they're uninformed. I think, again, how do you articulate the issues affecting them may then take them in a different direction. But I don't think many times is that, and we can give the gentleman with the NIS matter the first credit for this, in that whether he is politically conscious or not, he needed no political motivation to bring this matter now that became a national issue on the front burner. My point is, when the politicians think they have to go to the people, or leadership think they have to go to the people, sometimes the people already know all the issues. We're just repeating to them things that are affecting them.
Yeah.
All right. So, I mean, I have not been in the position of official leadership. I still hold as a community leader where I'm involved in many issues from time to time. But that is something I think, even as you answer the question on educating people, I still come back to that point. And you said, yes, people should be in the streets. But at this point in time, and this is the question I really want to ask, at this point in time, that you have all of these organizations who have some common interests, where do you see those issues converging for us to appreciate that we're all speaking the same thing, but it is how we are addressing it differently that may have not given people that sort of confidence that we can take them to a different direction? Why so difficult, do you believe?
I think the challenge, and the viewers and listeners, blame Sharm, not me. He's the one who asked the question. And I like this discussion because I think that as two men who are, I hope he can be considered younger than many. Our generation is inclined to have discussions that are a bit more mature, and not feelings don't get hurt so easily. I think that much of the power of social media has also sought to injure, for the likes of Region 10, the effectiveness of its being led, of it being led properly, in that many things are ventilated in public and just float around social media, whether it's accurate and accurate, whatever. People just throw their views out there in comments and other things. And so the whole concept of unity is missing in Region 10. And the view is that there's a disjointed leadership, quite a bit of disconnection in terms of community-based leadership. And that is not going to help us. It can be rectified quite easily. If everybody decides to just put their hat on the table and say, listen, man, we all want people with one cause. We have an interest in Linden being developed, in Region 10 being developed. And so we can fight in the room. But when we get out there, let's stand united and defend the people. And if every leader approaches this with this concept, then the image of this unity would no longer be hovering over or be cast upon Region 10. And it has a lot to do with how people perceive the quality of leaders that they have. Go ahead.
I like that. Let me just get a quick one in. So I am liking this because, you know, I take blame. I listen. I don't run.
You
and
asked.
Take, you know, once you hold this out there, you know, the thing is, I am not, as I said, an official position. I don't hold the title of apostle or a chairman or a mayor or a councillor. You know, I don't have a following, a congregation. I don't have an establishment. You know, this is an individual now. I may have some notoriety from my days in the past as a past leader. You know,
you still have a voice, man. That's what matters.
People still have certain expectations, but the point of disunity, even though we have the common issues, everyone was up there when the bulldozing of the house went down.
Right.
Notwithstanding you, and I know we've been calling for this over a month now, and we'll come to the issue of the bulldozing in Amelia's ward at the end of this. But those are common things. People know the issue of unemployment, of the general treatment, the state-controlled media, and all of these things. Leadership of every level, civil society, politics, even the trade unions, wherever they come. So there is a commonness of issues. And you said disunity. Why do you believe, even with the commonness of issues, you still have disunity?
And I really appreciate that question. And it happens because people, if we don't sit and, in a very responsible manner, identify and articulate, speak to the people on a repetitive basis, what is the issue? Not who are the personalities in the community. What is the issue? What bothers us? What are the things that matter to us? We have one television station for forever. Do we want to see that change? Do we want to have other radio stations in Linden where people are free to disseminate and relay information one to the other? Do you wish to have a reduction in the licensing fee, which I think is just totally ridiculous? Do we want to have development whereby it is community based and it springs forth from within the community, or people come to tell you, I'll give you a road, I'll give you this, I'll give you that, I'll give you that? If we as leaders can sit and leaders in community can get together to consistently present to the community, these are the issues that we prepare to fight with you or for you on. Let's get together and defend this. We will have a better approach to developing Region 10, as opposed to persons becoming what I consider to be comfortable with dysfunction and comfortable with discrimination. People fight or speak about things and it doesn't last for long, because there is not a collective and a consistent voice regarding the issues that face us in the region. We have to, again, I'd say for reinforcement, we must articulate, speak together as a community. What is the issue that we face? What are the issues? What are the pressing issues that we're not prepared to negotiate for or about until they're resolved? What are the issues that we must all agree upon to fight for? If we can do that, then we can go forward. But there's not a consistent definition of issues, describing of these issues, and presentation of the issues to the people for them to fight for anything on a long-term basis.
Well, I like that, but you see the thing I extract from that also, and how do you then fit people? Because there must be some level of responsibility coming from people that they must know. We just give them credit, a lot of credit. Even the NIS gentlemen, who having knowledge, we give them credit for having available to them new technologies that bring information quickly and fast to them.
Yeah.
But how do you then get people to take responsibility? And you know, I like to joke many times, even as a farmer chairman, I know if people come into my office with picket cards, you know, I got picket, I was there by. And I could count 5 times, you know, it was so thing, but it was so impressionable on me that I cannot forget what people are prepared to do to also take on some of that responsibility to ensure I was held accountable for my stewardship, and at the same time understand that they're prepared to work with leadership and to take leadership. What do you think is affecting that now? To people we've spoken about education, we've spoken about the issue of disunity and where disunity needs to find the sort of solutions. But we now come to people, because your movement as a civil society movement is called the people's movement. Where do you see people taking responsibility in some of this? Because I get pickets, so I don't put it past them, and they not all of this.
No, and I'm happy that although they would have stood in protest and picket in front of you, you're prepared to, or were prepared to stand.
We welcome in the boardroom. We welcome teachers in the boardroom, nurses in the boardroom, cleaners in the. I know exactly who picket me.
Exactly, and that is so powerful, because when you speak to that, it speaks to the potency of your being a leader and the quality of a leader who you are. You're prepared to accept criticism, persons being upset with you, and then you're prepared to entertain them in a manner that speaks to your being willing to hear both sides and listen to what they have to say. They hear you, and you move forward in the interest of the whole. But in answering your question more directly, the whole term, the people's movement, speak to what can happen. Because this is about independent thinkers. We need to have a revival of the independent mind. You happen to be one, I happen to be one. We are able to think for ourselves. And the NIS gentleman, for example, who stood in front of Jaggi and said, listen, we got a problem here. When would our pension be raised? That is an independent thinker. It didn't matter who was around him. He was prepared to stand and express himself with a great degree of strength. And that is the quality of people we have who will act. You see, if we look at the masses to act, but the masses do not have independent minds, we're still weak. So the strength would lie not in how many people act, but what would be the quality of those who prepare to act. And I've engaged people and met people in the street, as you rightly said, who have got quite a bit of information. And I'm shocked sometimes when I speak to taxi drivers, the way they interact with me, the things they say. I'm saying, now hold on. These people are not ordinary here. They've got quite a plethora of information to offer, But what they do not have is the impetus and the strength and the just a little jab to say, listen, I'm with you. So what we find in many cases, people want to have a leader or a few leaders who are willing to just ignite that flame and say, listen, let's do this. And they're prepared to follow. But if they look to leadership and they see the leadership is inactive and leadership is incapable of acting, then it's very rare you'll find people being willing to stand on their own unless they're really true independent thinkers.
All right. I'm seeing in some of the comments, boots on the ground, the call for boots on the ground still, and I just heard you, we spoke of three elements within the conversation. Here is Miss Williams again asking for boots on the ground. And we spoke on the issue of educating the masses so as to ensure that the masses understand what it is they're struggling for, how do you aggregate the things that are affecting them the most, and how do you articulate those things so that they understand clearly. We dealt with the issue of disunity, and we understand that there is need for people to understand how to work together, to bring their ideas together, because we're all suffering the same way.
Right.
And then we spoke about the issue of people and how much responsibility they will have to take. And even though they're in the know, so as to speak, there is some level of restraint because there is the need for ignition, even in the know. All right. So, yes, I just wanted to make sure Ms. Williams understand that even with the people's struggle, even with political movements, even with trade unions, as we've seen them all being criticized either by people or by even their own membership of being very inactive. And by now, boots should be on the ground. Boots should be on the ground. All right. We haven't seen that as yet, however. What do you believe that is needed? And I think it's very unfortunate that the last major disruption of civil disobedience in this country happened exactly 10 years ago. And unfortunately, it resulted in the loss of lives of our brothers Shemrai, Ron, and Mr. Lewis. So the thing about it is that without getting there and addressing Miss Williams of Boots on the Ground 10 years ago, where do you see that ignition coming from?
Well, it's on your screen, a great leader. People need to be led. It's a normal human trait to follow. Many people aren't born to lead because the responsibilities that come with leadership, many people cannot handle it. But there needs to be, I would like to think that out of this, the house is being bulldozed, that it would have been the ignition, the spark, the trigger to say that this is it. You're not going to come into our town and just destroy our people like this. But then when I'm hearing about so many other players involved and how many parties surround this whole situation, that's one cause why the move could not have started. But it's my view that there'll be something that would trigger at some point a reaction from society at large. Because as I've said, civil society organizations are getting together. We're meeting, we're having conversations. I'm having quite a few meetings with other organizations, and we recognize that there is a strategy that we must utilize, and it involves quite a degree of patience, but also the power of social media. You see, civil disobedience now is not just about the street. Everyone who has a device in their hand and a device in their home, you don't have to leave your house to make a statement. You can simply share, like this broadcast, for example. You can share this, you can spread the information, and this goes to so many other people. Most importantly, if we stand on the street in Linden, we are confined to a geographic space because we're three-dimensional beings. But if we share information and go on social media, you can your stream can get to Turkey, to Japan, to Mexico. You can reach the international community from one phone, like the guy in Tunisia. So we don't know how far a simple act of sharing something on social media can go. It doesn't mean that we eliminate boots on the ground, but we have to understand that when we get to the ground, there must also be an international reach. So that when the elements who thought, like 10 years ago, that they can come to the bridge, for example, and pull weapons on us. Unlike then, there are too many cameras that be rolling today for them to try it. And that's the difference. We have to understand the difference that technology has caused us to experience and utilize that to our benefit. So I'm not saying that we would not be on the street. I am, at this moment, planning and organizing carefully a very, very potent, very strategic move to go to the streets of this country, but not to go just to say we on the road, boots on the ground. It's to see that there's going to be a tidal wave of change that will cause elected officials to take note of what's happening.
Well, Apostle, both you and I know about boots on the ground. I know last year you were out there
Yeah.
withstanding the elements, COVID and all. You were out there, boots on the ground for the teachers, boots on the ground for the Minister of Health, and always how he was handling the COVID crisis, boots on the ground for the Linden Hospital complex and the nurses. And you and I know we had a common understanding of where we would have found some results with that and an outcome. And we saw you again with boots on the ground with the persons who are occupying lands in Amelia's ward. And I don't use the issue of squatting, and I'll tell you why. Whether the legal or illegality of a matter, I always see it as the responsibility of the state to address the issue. And how the state chooses to address that issue, or chooses to address that issue, it then demonstrates to me how it will be reciprocated to them in the conduct and the behavior of those who they're addressing that issue in the name of. And I give you this because I remember in Rossville, in Andyville, so we had people like Amanda Harris and others, in Crossville, where we had the late brother Ali Bieshi and Lance Easton, Wild Pine as we know him as.
Okay.
And then we had those residents in Amelia's ward, the very first phase. And I remember, I'm speaking at the time I was chairman. And all of these people are now living dignified lives. They have infrastructure, light, water, roads that are now in those communities. And I'm making this point with reference to our Amelia's ward situation now and the issue of housing. Do you believe that there is an approach that could be taken now based on where the matter is to not only ensure those people who are violated, but those people who are in need of place to stay, live, Guyanese, Lindeners in particular, can now be dealt with differently based on what we see the government heavy-handedness is about? Because I know those residents, I'm saying to you, in my days were dealt with differently.
Right. They're trying to do it differently now. But if they would have demonstrated in terms of the administration their callousness, their disregard for human beings, what I consider to be one of the most derogatory and dehumanizing thing you can do to a person is to have them in the house, as was the case of the woman. She only happened to walk out of the house and have her house knocked down in front of her face. I mean, when you do those kinds of things to people, the repair or the attempt to repair is never going to be easy to achieve. So now I'm aware that they're seeking to engage persons on an individual basis and promise them, okay, we get a house lot, come to us in housing and we give you a house lot. But they're not addressing the human right violation, the atrocities. And so to inflict that degree of injury, then to boot to have the Guyana police force officers present with assault rifles. I mean, you were going to a war zone then. So to do these things to people and then say, well, okay, then we'll give you a house that now that just quell the situation. It is not going to be repaired that easily, and it should not be repaired that easily. So what I would like to advocate for, and I'm saying, I mean, across the board, I intend to, as a matter of fact, I'll write to the human rights organizations. I intend to approach the Women's Gender and Equality Commission in these places, children rights groupings, so that they can focus on this as a human right violation. There's not just a people's structure being damaged here. You have affected the quality of life of a human being. You have trampled upon the integrity of a human being, and they would have sought to destroy the strength and the psychological well-being of women. And that is not going to be treated just by saying, we'll give you house stop and it's over. So we are going to attack this from many different angles, because if the leaders, to some degree, believe that there's only one approach, and maybe we can try many others in the civil society arm. And that's why we become important again. Because from a civil society perspective, I'm looking at this for political points. This is about people's lives who are being disrupted by draconian, tyrannical dictators. And to know that even the central ministry, the Minister of Housing and others sought to explain this away. You see, the administration doesn't seem to understand that when they do something wrong to people, the best approach to take is to be humble. They sought to have pieces done and videos done, documentaries done on how they are seeking to advance and develop Linden, and justifying that you have to destroy people's houses to get things done. That is not going to fly by me. So it is not easy to appease a person when you've already dehumanized them and treat them in such a manner that is just destructive. And I'm not accepting anything less than an apology from the president of this country to these people. Secondly, proper and meaningful compensation to those people. And thirdly, the equality in Region 2, Anil Nandalal and Colin Crowell went to Jib and to sort out issues whereby they said the persons who were living on those lands for decades, a land owned by Mr. Singh, owned by somebody. For decades, they were trespassing on the people's land, but now they're entitled to have documents or legal ownership. So what makes them different then? These things will not go by me so easily, Mrs. Solomon. So there's no easy compensation or easy just wiping the smear away here. It's not happening.
Well, Apostle, you know that I am a direct party that has been affected. 39 brothers and myself, we are doing some farming at the back of Amelia's ward.
Right.
We've been there for over 10 years now. And we've had some of our crops bulldozed. We've spoken about this matter for over a month now. This is when it actually occurred. It occurred last month, just before Easter. And we've brought this matter. I mean, you and I spoke the same day it was occurring.
Yes.
I give you an update and I said that we managed to get them to stop, but this would not have been after they would have destroyed a few of our crops and pushed down our fence. And in the estimate of almost $2 million. In fact, we were given an assurance by the CEO of Central Housing and Planning that NARI would have visited us by now and to do an evaluation on the damages that they've caused, and they would have sent in Central Housing after that, having a list of the people who were there farming. And people might say, but what kind of farming? Yes, we have crops there that soursop trees that are at least 15 to 14 feet high. We had about 2,000 coconut plants down on the ground. We had several thousand orange plants, 600 soursop. You know, that's the sort of amount of crops that we had, and we lost a lot of that. And the assurance have not been fulfilled by now. So I can not only attest to, but I can understand the frustration of those who suffered and those who lost. But what do you say of the representation, Apostle? What do you say of the representation? In this suffering, in general, you're part of the representation too here. Because we're speaking about civil society, we're speaking about the trade unions, we're speaking about the politicians. What do you say of the representation? Because that motivates people to ask for boots on the ground.
Indeed so. And the representation is certainly lacking in many aspects. And we have to eliminate this reactionary approach that we have to things. Because as you rightly said, you and I were there when this all began. And you and I had conversations way in the back before it got
without all the cameras and all the Facebook.
Exactly so. Yeah. Exactly so. And we engaged these people, we had conversations, and they made certain assurances. And so, in fairness, you and I both give them an opportunity to say, okay, then this will stop. And there'll be a better approach going forward. However, at that forum and at this forum, I will say without reservation and continue to say that I expressed to you, although you were not an elected official. My concern then was, how could someone come to be pushing something as major as a road in a community, and the mayor has not informed the community, the deputy mayor has not informed the community, the regional chairman has not informed the community, the two members of parliament are unaware, councillors, the constituency councillor. I mean, so who knows? Who knew? Is this an undercover covert operation? Somebody just came in and began to push a machine through the bushes and nobody knew what's happening? So that in itself speaks to the lack of representation from the side of the elected officials. And that is why the focus of the people's movement is about holding elected officials accountable. We have got a culture that has to end in this country, or has to change, whereby elected officials, the higher up they go, the more rights they think they have to do whatever they want, and nobody holds them accountable in reference or reaction to them. So many people would wonder, why am I so critical of so many people who are in office? Because that's my job, to hold them accountable. They're paid to do something, hence they will do it. If you don't want to do it, then don't be paid for it and leave the office. So in reference to the representation, it was lacking from when it happened on the farmland. So now it got to people's dwelling places, it is still lacking, because you had a reaction after I went live, and people say, okay, then, well, we're here now to say we're going to build the place back. That doesn't solve the problem, because restoring the structure does not restore integrity to the person. It doesn't restore confidence in the community that they cannot come in and do what they want to do with us. And that is the most important part of this whole equation. Are we going to be represented in a manner that, or I should say, therefore, shall we represent, including myself here, the people in a manner whereby those at Central Housing and Planning Authority will think twice before they try this again? And that's what it comes down to, where we are able as leaders and as people in the community to take a stance that is so strong that they will never risk this again. They're going to come and have the proper town meetings. They're going to have engagement with people. They're going to have, if they have to move anyone from a dwelling place, they will do what they did on the East Coast, which is to find the CDC and others and put them in schools or annexes and so on, and house them, hostels. Don't tell me that you could do it for somebody, but you can't do it for Londoners. But it comes down to, how do we represent our people? And it's about time for us to represent the people in a manner that they deserve to be represented. I will do everything I can, but there's only so much I can do. I'm not funded. There's no budget to govern how I behave. So the most I can do is everything I can.
I hear that. I'm glad you're saying, likewise me, there is no budget. There is just a willingness and an understanding of what the issues are, and how do you get people to understand how they can make, not only for themselves representation, but to get representation. But just as we wrap the program up, Apostle, what do you, and this could be a question coming from a position of someone who held political office and as a social activist myself,
Okay.
do you see then the argument being on the side of the politicians, the trade unions, as you've used for yourself, to say of civil society, that at this moment there is need for education and all of those steps? We are now fixing the thing back because indeed it's disunited, and we have to get people to understand where unity is. We started out coming from 2011, coming to 2015 as a partnership, as a coalition, bringing stakeholders involved, bringing civil society together. We've seen where along the line, some of that have been loosened and people have fagged out, so to speak. Different parties have started to hold their different views, even though there is still the label coalition. Do you see those same arguments are justifiable for those camps also, that they have to go through those same process before we get the boots on the ground?
Uh, Not necessarily so. There is, if I understand the question correctly, Akergi, correct me if I'm going on the wrong track here, but I see that there's a need for us to really sit and have a discussion across many facets of society, and to really understand what is the need of our people in this country. What do we really need? Do we really need to have a connection on the basis of all, which, and people like to use the word stakeholders, and many people use it loosely in the PPP Civic. But if you really want to understand the value of each other, there needs to be all of these parties getting together, not political parties. And just permit me to answer if I heard it correctly. All interested parties, I should say, get together. What do we want to achieve? For example, for Region 10, what do we want to accomplish as a whole? Can we do this together? Can we do this in a manner whereby everybody benefits in the true sense of the word, without there being somebody saying, well, I have to be in charge, I have to be in charge? Can we do that to move the town or the region forward? If we can do that here, then I think it can happen on a national scale. So if I interpret your question to mean that if there's need for all of these things, like with the APNU AFC and these coalitions, understanding the power of unity and in the interest of the whole, then yes, there needs to be that.
So then they then can take that same argument that they have to go through the phase of education, they have to overcome the issue of disunity, they have to ensure that they have people understanding that they too have a part to play in this, and not just to stand on the outside and say what the leaders are doing, but how they too can hold those leaders accountable and themselves to take action.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying, Apostle, is that we're not at that stage yet for boots on the ground.
No, we're not. And the reason why we're not at that stage yet is because if we begin to identify things like, okay, who is leading the boots? Who boots in front? Who will be the front boot? Who's the front man? Who organized it? I'm losing my voice. Who pushed the button? Who got this one to do this? Who got the? Once you do that, you're not ready for your boot to be anywhere. Because the most valuable point I've learned in my life, given my independent stance, is what I said to people from the beginning. If I stand alone, my brother, and I understand why I'm standing there, if 10,000 people come and stand around me, it doesn't bother me, it doesn't impress me. I know why I'm standing there. If the same 10,000 people walk away from me, I still stand right there because I understand the cause of my standing. So again, I'm saying to people, it's not about how many people come to stand with you. Do you understand why you're standing there? Now, if we can begin to get people to understand the power of having a critical and independent mind, then all it takes maybe for 10 of us to stand. Because I realize that with the likes of you, the likes of me, Mr. Ben Shop and others who are not easily swayed by people's words, they're very cautious as to how they handle what we say. Because they know that we're not fickle-minded and easily swayed. And that is what I hope we can have reignited and reborn in our society, so that we can, honestly, when we go to the streets and stand, we're not standing because it's a mass of people who are standing. It's a group of independent thinkers who understand the power of unity. Now, there's a big difference. We are independent thinkers who understand the power of unity. We're not sheep. We are independent thinkers who understand the power of unity. That's what
I like that. I like that, Apostle. And as we close, I think that is one of the most powerful positions for us to close on. Independent thinkers who understand the power of unity. And I'll put maybe a few more to that. The people can also bring together in their own articulation of the willingness to make sacrifices too. I think that is very, very important. And it speaks to the ideological impression that is made on any individual that brings them to that point of understanding why they're prepared to make sacrifices.
Yes.
Why the woman is prepared to leave her 2 children at home and get to the streets because she understands ideologically what the struggle is about and why it is that she's going out into that street. So I am very encouraged by this conversation, Apostle. I look forward to ensuring that we can have the space in the room created for civil society to function. Myself, as someone who served in politics and who served as a social activist, I think I bring that understanding together. So thanks again for being on, Apostle.
Thank you.
To you, our audience, I hope that we were able to explain to you those elements that bring together what really constitute a functional democratic society, where we see the issue of good governance, we see the issue of human rights, space being available for civil society to function, unlike what the president would have said, that he doesn't even recognize civil society and they have to now justify that they exist, as we saw the policy forum doing on the 6th of this month, by having to say, listen, we exist. All right, so again, we hope to see these elements coming together and working in a functional way so that we can get quickly to that state where we can put boots on the ground if we're not satisfied. So again, Apostle, thank you, and thanks everyone for having us on this evening. You have a blessed rest.
So this is attorney Shellen Washington, owner and founder of the Washington Law Firm, located at 455 Utica Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. We're specialized in medical malpractice, personal injuries, matrimonial law, and landlord and tenant. If you're in need of legal representation, please give us a call today. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Consultation is free at no cost to you. So call us today to see if we can be of any assistance to your legal needs. Again, the phone number to call us is 718-877-3100.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins firm. Contact them at alistaircollinsfirm.com.